Okay, my friends, I've been putting the pieces together, and we're going to be talking about the giants, minor DNA tested, CAT scan, all kinds of stuff done. And the body parts that are in space, specifically Bennu, which they just went out and took a sample, brought it back to Earth, and it is literally biology, no question whatsoever, and they don't disagree with that. Now, we're going to be looking at all these things that I'm going to be showing, and I'm going to be discussing what they mean in the ancient texts and how they talked about battles in the heavens. And Velikovsky went to every culture on the planet. They all had the same story, the same timeline. We were impacted by a fiery comet, which later turned out to be Venus, and it caused a great flood and killed all the giants and all that stuff. Enoch wrote the truth about our ancient past. They took it out of the biblical text because it was too much. Nobody's ever going to believe that. 2.5 mile tall people? Well, let me tell you something. That is not out of the question whatsoever. There's hearts in space, like this one right here. Hold on, where is it? That's a heart. I'm going to show you the details on this, and if I can have any heart surgeon, I want a heart surgeon to contact me and say, no, Roger, you're wrong. I'm going to show the details. It just cannot be dismissed. So let's just get started. But this is spectacular stuff, and it is what it is. If you can't go there, don't go there. It's up to you. But it should be able to be seen, and right now I'm blocked basically everywhere for literally showing this stuff. The same thing happened to Velikovsky. They actually took his book off the bookshelves after being 11, 12 weeks, something like that, on #1 on the bestseller list, New York Times. And they forced to take it off because they attacked the publisher, which was Macmillan, who had a textbook division. They sold tons of textbooks. They said, we're never going to buy another thing from you if you don't take that book off the bookshelves. Gone. And Velikovsky was basically destroyed the whole rest of his life. And people still think he was an idiot because of Carl Sagan and people like that demeaning him in the public arena. We're going to see the real truth. And I have the supporting evidence to support his documentation everywhere in the world. It wasn't just here, it wasn't just there. It was on both sides, north to south, and this to this, everywhere. They all had the same story about this wrenching of the earth and a global flood. And it wasn't just Noah and his family that survived. They were given the knowledge to build the ark to save a lot of the animals and so forth. But the rest, there appears to be a lot of survivors because everybody had the same story. It didn't just come from Noah. And then they all had their own gods. It's just what it was. This is a very difficult thing for the average mind to even stop to consider. So if you have an average mind, vayos con Dios. Okay, my outstanding friends, most of you have been with me for up to 10 years. And I've been talking about the giants all that time, and 10 years ago, this was the results of the DNA test. And this was a sophisticated test. And it came out to be that there were Homo sapien, mitochondrial B gene, and the D-loop region. Mitochondrial DNA is from the mother's side of the union. And we all have that exact same mitochondrial DNA, or there's sequences in that mitochondrial DNA that indicate the species that we're dealing with. And these are the species, Homo sapien, Homo sapien, Homo sapien. That's us. That's from the mother's side. That's why they're the same. And any test you do, and you find that it has that sequence in the mitochondrial DNA, it's going to be a Homo sapien. Now there's other types of, the Cro-Magnon man and all these other things. apparently they have some other DNA sequence. That I'm not going to talk about. This is my evidence to support my specimens that are anatomically exact, and not only did it come back positive, it was excellent quality DNA sequences obtained from the 36-inch tip and the lung. The hand, which I will show you, did not have quite so much really red raw blood. The other ones is just raw blood, basically. And they will actually have actual wet raw blood in them. I'm going to just show you a heart to start off. But what we're going to be talking about today is the giants. There's so much evidence to support the ancient texts that just fits exactly, boom, 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 right down the line. So we're going to have to take a look at that right now. Yeah, you see, it just went over 10 years now. I had this done in 2015, 6/20 of 2015, and it took a few months. By September, which is basically now, it was done, and the 3 mud fossil samples were, they took the DNA out of what I sent them, which was an extraction by me. I extracted the material very carefully. It was not contaminated, and they said they do these other tests on it to see if there's mixing of DNA, apparently, and it came out, no, there was no problem. So it wasn't like, anyway, don't worry about that. And they're available to be tested again. And I'll show you, it was literally raw blood came out of them. That's the key. And they're anatomically exactly identical. Okay, I either showed you this or I will show you this, but this is excellent quality DNA sequence was obtained from the 36-inch tip sample and the lung sample, which was the big hand and the lung, and they were both mitochondrial cytochrome B and D loop region, Homo sapien. Now that's a PCR test. This is serious stuff. And this was all those CTAGs in those sequences determines exactly what the species is. Mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, is a powerful tool for species identification. It tells you exactly what, and they're Homo sapien. And I said, is this exactly the same as us, the modern human? He says, yes. And I drilled into them deep. This was not contaminated. It was excellent quality, and they are available to be retested for any naysayers. Okay, my friends, I'm going to just sort of blurt it out. Every culture on Earth, 100% had dragons, and they had giants. And I asked, did ancients say they saw giants battling in the heavens? Actual giants. As a matter of fact, let me put in her actual. In ancient myths, giants were frequently depicted battling gods for supremacy in the sky. Now they're saying not as real world observation, but as metaphors. No, it wasn't metaphors, it was true. They were out there battling in the heavens, and the body parts are there for all to see. And that's what I've been showing, is the body parts in space. Okay, my friends, a lot of you are probably here just for this spectacular part about giants. Wow, they were real. Well, they were real. And I have the evidence to support that. So, and you will see this evidence in extreme detail. But what does it actually mean? The giants part, fully understood now. The body parts in space, also fully understood. They brought back a piece of asteroid Bennu, and it is heart muscle, because that was a heart. There were battles, actual physical creatures battling in the heavens. And this was written about in literally all the texts from the earliest text. And you have to read Apollodorus and Hesiod, however you want to pronounce his name. Herodotus, all of those early, Ovid, of course, he was Ovid, Ovid, Metamorphosis. They could transform themselves into anything they wanted. They could be just gigantic giants. They could be the size of regular human beings. But I think they had some kind of gigantic size that they morphed into to battle each other, because the sizes of these body parts in space are just unbelievable. And I mean, literally unbelievable. That's why nobody's ever believed this. But now we have the evidence to prove that there's no question. This is a factual events that occurred. And my DNA tested giants, and they are giants. And I'm going to show you the body parts right now and the DNA tests. And this is not a silly DNA test. Now, when we're talking about these battles in the heavens, Velikovsky, who was my personal hero, struggled against academia and wrote the history of the world. Every population on the world, not just the Greeks, not just the Romans. He came to the other side of the ocean, and he had all the Aztecs, the Mayans, all of the peoples of both, everywhere in the world, just put it that way. Everywhere on the world, he collected their stories, which they passed down. And there was holders of truth. There was keepers of the faith and keepers of facts. And that's where he went and got all that stuff. And it all added up to the same thing. That there was giants battling in the heavens, and that these events were very recent. And it was the global flood. Earth was basically hit, or very close to being hit, by Venus, and I believe that impact site was the Grand Canyon, and there's a whole batch of reasons I can show, because it's ripped right down into the guts of some gigantic creature. And it also pushed in uranium, which is a lot of excess energy smashed into the ground, and it's trying to decay to get down to back to normal. That's what uranium is. It's just too much energy in it. Now, and then it did hit Mars and wiped Mars completely off the face, totally everything. It took its magnetic field, sucked it into Venus. And then Mars, I came down at 763, and he founded Rome, basically, with Romulus and Remus. That's a whole other story, but they basically took over the Earth. Now that's on this side, or on the other side of the ocean. I'm on America. But all kinds of things happen here too, with our own gods that were here. The feathered serpent, no question whatsoever, he's runs right up the east coast. And the other ones, which is Typhon and the fish, Ares, which is the god of war, are in the desert in Morocco. Exactly what I showed for years and years now. There's no secret to this. It's being avoided, so we need to, if you want to know about reality, you got to start with reality, however uncomfortable that reality may be. And Jesus himself said that when you find, you're going to be disturbed. Don't stop seeking. But when you do find, you will be disturbed. And then you will marvel. And I'm telling you, this is the biggest unveiling and discovery in human history, basically, is mud fossils. It proves everything. And Velikovsky wrote all the text, but he didn't have the physical evidence, which I do. And we're going to go into that physical evidence right now. But the Greeks had battles, mythical battles, between giants battling the gods in the heavens. And then it goes on to the most important one. The most famous one was Zeus and the giants. And Gaia mated with Tartarus to produce Typhon, which was a gigantic monster that's in Africa, North Africa, and he attacked Ares, which was the god of war, who is actually Mars. Here's the thing: they keep one name from Romans, one name from the Greek, same guy. One of the cultures loved him, one of the cultures hated him. The Greeks saw Ares, which is Mars, as a very violent, brutal, bloodthirsty, savage creature, god. Now, the Romans was a whole different story. He actually came down to Earth when Mars was destroyed, is my opinion at this point. That was about 800 BC. That's what Velikovsky said. If you read what he said, he says that Venus was ejected, was born from the feared god Jupiter. Jupiter, the planet, gave birth to Venus, and it was designed to come down and wipe out the Earth. And it was foretold to Noah to get himself ready. There's going to be a nightmarish flood, and save whatever you can save. And now in the Greek, they talk about Prometheus being the one that molded man out of clay. There's a whole new way of looking at this stuff, but a lot of it does fit into the biblical text. I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. I'm saying that there's much more to this. It's much more nuanced, and this was all recorded by Hesiod, and dictated to him by the daughters of Zeus. And that was only 800 BC. And they gave him a sturdy laurel rod, a marvelous thing, and blew into it knowledge. And he wrote everything that they told him about the heritage, the cosmology, the beginning of the Gaia and the sky mating, and having monsters and the Cyclopses. All of that stuff is covered. Hercules, Zeus, the lightning thunderbolts, the dragons. It's all laid out there in text. Always dismissed because of it's just too much. It's too much for the average human mind to take in. That's why they dropped all of that stuff from Enoch and Jubilees, and all of that came out from the original earliest texts about our history, and really about our history. They took it out because they said, who's going to believe that? Who's going to believe people were 2.5 miles tall? Well, the gods, as Ovid presents, the first 2 lines out of 12,000 lines says, I'm here to tell you about creatures, about entities that change themselves into anything they want. And they often by means of violence, and turned into the natural landscape. That's what the gods did. They were throwing mountains on other gods. They were taking islands. The things that you read, if they are true, yikes. But then you look at the size of Typhon and Quetzalcoatl and Scorpzilla and all of those. And there's a ton of them. There's another big one down underneath, coming around underneath South America. They're everywhere, literally everywhere, and they were what created this earth. How that happened, I can't tell you. Did it all just glob together as creatures? I can't tell you. But they all have the same story, that some creature or a bunch of creatures, it's all balled together, or just exploded and the head became the earth, or whatever. They all have a story about the creation story, which would be the myth of how things started. Now, I am having to go with Apollodorus at the time, because he wrote exactly what happened to Typhon and the fish. He said the gods, which was Mars, which was the fish, which is also known as Ares, turned themselves into animals to try to get a hide away from Typhon, who was spitting fire at him. Well, you can see Ares, the fish, didn't get away. Typhon got him. I've shown it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And people are saying, oh, you keep showing it. Yes. Because you keep not looking and not looking and not looking. That's why I keep showing and showing and showing. And I'm just going to have to do this because we have to know our reality. Okay. I asked, did the ancients say they saw giants battling in the heavens? Actual giants in the heavens? Yes. Several ancient cultures, most notably Greeks and Norse, describe mythic battles where giants battled the gods in the heavens. Now, that would lead to body parts because these things were absolutely enormous and they had serious weapons. Now, the most famous one was about the giants, and the war of the giants. This is Zeus fought against the monstrous giants, and basically, after he killed all the giants, that's when Typhon was born. Because Gaia, the earth, was so upset with Zeus, she wanted Typhon to wipe the gods out, and it didn't work out for Typhon. Zeus cut his throat. And now they talk about, they had to have the help of Hercules. Hercules was part mortal, and a god could not kill another god. Something about it. They had to have the help of a mortal. And Hercules came around and shot him in the eyes where they were dying with arrows. And he goes on all these different combatants, and Odin and Thor and Ragnarok. They all had the same stories. And also in the Americas, the same thing. They had their own gods. It was just one side is over here, one side is over here. Something, that part I'm having a hard time with. Where did they come from? Now, in the Bible it says there was, I believe it's 200 fallen angels. And I think there was 600 to start with, watchers. And 200 of them said, wow, let's go down there. We can turn ourselves into anything we want. So let's turn ourselves into males, hot-looking males, and we'll have sex parties. Basically, that's exactly what happened. And they did, but their genetic makeup didn't work with the daughters of man. And the kids grew to miles tall. And that's when they had to wipe them off the face of the planet. They started eating each other, eating the people. It was a nightmare. Same thing on the East Coast. On the East Coast, yeah, where Typhon, Quetzalcoatl is. It happened everywhere on our Earth. And they saw them actually battling in the heavens. Now let me show you what the proof is that these body parts are in heaven. There is just no question about it. Now, I don't see how anybody can dispute what I'm saying here. This is basically a hip joint, socket joint of some sort. And it's broken off like here instead of fractured here or there. But they're showing the inside of a body, of a creature, the hip. Now, it's going to have to be fed with blood. And where the tendon is, there's got to be synovial stuff. So let's see if we can find that. Don't forget, this is what we're looking at, is a body part. Now this is in space, and that is big. And I followed this from the day they went up there, European Space Agency. It was the Philae lander. They landed, they took samples, the whole shooting match. They didn't return with anything. However, they just went to Bennu and did come back with stuff. And that is, there's no question, it's biology. So first of all, let me prove to you, as the best I can, what this particular structure is that's out in space, and when it gets close enough to the sun, it gases off. It's not dust, and I'll show you that. Okay, this is Comet 67P, basically. Now, it broke right here, and all that stuff ripped off. So you've got, down here it's broken. Now, in order for your blood to get up or go down back and forth through your leg, you're going to have a huge artery. All right? And then you're going to have, all of these are going to have little fluids in them, because they have to do this. When you move your legs and your arms, and wherever you move, tendons have to slide against each other. So there has to be some wet synovial fluids in here. You don't need stuff here. That would cook off and it would be gone. So what should we see? We should see one big blast of gases that would be just the same thing that would come out of your barbecue grill. And then we're going to see some little tiny fluffy things coming out from here when it gets cooked. But it has to hit it in the right light so it goes down inside to where the juices are. You'd have to hit like down here. And where the artery is, if it was like this and the sun was hitting, you wouldn't get anything. But if it was like this and the sun was hitting, you're going to get a blast coming out of it. And that's exactly what we have in Comet 67P. So don't forget, this is what we're looking at. We're going to have some tendon. We're going to have some muscle. We're going to have blood. And we're going to have this structure. All right, so here it is. It's not gassing off anything. There's no dust coming off. It's just coming through space. The light has to hit it exactly the right way for the extreme frequencies of light to cook off the bodily fluids that are in there. There's bodily fluids in there, and I'm going to show it to you right now. So there is Comet 67P. It broke off right here. And again, that's the socket. And there's going to be, well, I'll show you what there's going to be. All right, this is the reason we're seeing this and this, is because of this brilliance. You see that? The sun is coming directly down into that artery. And that artery is 500 feet across. That artery is absolutely stunningly large. These creatures, all I can say is they must have pumped themselves up as big as they could, and then had the battles, and then they just exploded each other into bits and pieces. Now, remember I said you're going to have blood, and this is the artery. Of that, there is, in my mind, no question. Now, every one of these little chutes is going to be where there's tendons that are sliding amongst each other. And right out of there, you're going to get a little jet coming out. But the sun, again, has to hit it. It's hitting right in the right way to make these things shoot out. And this is back 10 years ago. And I reported all this stuff to NASA and Yale and everybody about this, the European Space Agency too. This is very hard for the average mind to absorb. You see that? That's about 500 feet across. And that is the artery. Down, and it feeds blood from your feet in the top of your body all the way down to your feet. You have to have these big, huge tubes. And that is big, huge, and all these little dots, they call them dragon balls. Well, what they are is little blood vessels that let the blood into this area to feed the blood cells. And it's everywhere in the body. You know, we have the same thing in us. It's a little smaller, but it is basically the same thing. And here's what happens. I think I showed you this, boiling off. It's just being hit like a radar range. The same thing here. But the sun has to hit it exactly correctly. Now here's the bundle of, I believe this is muscle. And that came over here, because this thing has to move this way, that way. These are the tendons. They slide among each other. That's where we see these little splitzes coming out, remember? They would be coming right out of here, where they slide. They have to slide amongst them. If you turn this way or turn that way, that's what's going to happen. And these here, I think, are the little pinchy muscle bundle. See the little pinchy muscle bundles? And this stuff here is nothing more than dried blood. It's just sort of dried out coming through space since. If this is correct, and Velikovsky's correct, and I got to go along with what he said, because the whole world said the same thing. This would have happened 1300 BC, 1500 BC, somewhere around there. Or, you know, that's up in the air at this moment. But I did have all my tests done. And look at the size of this thing. This is 67P. Here it is on top of Raleigh, North Carolina. And there it is. This is big, big stuff. And Psyche, the heart that's in space, is 177 miles wide. And Bennu, which they just brought back a sample of heart muscle, that one's less than a mile wide, but they were big, they were small, they were all kind of different sizes. And I have big stuff here too. I showed you the DNA reports, I'm pretty sure. Let me show you the biological samples. Okay, I'm pretty sure I showed you the DNA reports, but these are showing that they're Homo sapien mitochondrial B and D loop region, which is a region in the mitochondrial DNA that signifies that we are the same as these samples. And these samples are these samples right here. All right, this is a hand, a left hand. Put yours back like this and look for this here. You just boom, 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 boom. You got one right there. It's right there. Everybody has that's the left hand. If you have a left hand, then there it is. And this is the pad that runs around your hand, this pad right here. And that's the cleave right there. This is the skin, the grip skin they call it, which is a dense, coarse, siliconized, keratinized skin, which has very little redness to it. It's a real tough stuff. And it's on your hands and feet and so forth, where you make contact. They call it friction skin, contact skin, grip skin. I call it grip skin. Now, again, the left hand, the thumb goes that way, the little finger comes out this way. This is only up to about here. And then down here you can see the actual bones. You see one here? Another one over here. I got all kinds of stuff from this. I got knuckles and fingers and anyway, this was tested, and I drill into them. I don't just swab it off the surface. So, and they showed the negative controls were negative. Everything's fine, and blood comes right out of them. You see that? This is a bone. They have these little foramen, they call them, which the blood vessels go through, and they come out of the bone. They go into the bone. They go here. They go there. Well, there's just still blood in them. You take them out of the ground and they just sit here, and all of a sudden the blood shows up in here. And you could do it yourself. If you got a muddy place and you got stones like this is, they call this mudstone. But all it did was it sealed what was in the contents of this bone. And in the arteries, for some reason, the red blood just does not harden up. It stays red and soft. All you got to do is put a little bit of moisture. And this had moisture in it, and then when it drained out, it came out. This is fibrin. That's the same stuff that's in clotting fiber when you get a scab. That's just a blood scab. And the fibrin comes here. And you see this red here and this black right here? That's because there was a vein in an artery. Now the black just seals off. The black is totally different than the red in its chemical makeup. All right, so here's how it started. It was like this. So I said, well, I'll just document it, because they all have these things, these little bone foramens like that. And then they have ligaments and whatever they got, attachments to cartilage. So I moved it off. And that was this one. And I could see the vein and the artery right here, the artery and the vein. The black is always the vein. And so here it was here in its final disassembly. Only this was a scheduled disassembly. And there's the black, fed whatever it fed, and there's the red, which fed whatever it fed. And that's coming out of a bone foramen. And this stuff here is mudstone. There's bits and pieces still in here of biological material, but it's been all infused with mud. It just looks like a muddy, inclusive mudstone. They would say that's not a body part. Well, there's no question it's a body part. And this all came out of the same hole, all these bones and the hand and the fingertips, which I had CAT scanned. Here's a fingertip. That's about, I think it's about 7 or 8 feet, 8 inches long, something like that. That came out of that big hand. That big hand is 4 feet wide. So well, here it is right here, hold on. Oh, I broke it off so I could see the bone. This is it right here. All right, you see that gash right there? That's this gash. Now this is a 2D CAT scan. 2D means they look at the outside in every single, hundreds of different shots, and then they compile it so that you can see all of the, you're never going to see that just looking at that rock, basically. You would say there's nothing there. That's just nothing. Well, it's there. You just can't see it. This shows it up, and that's where the fingernail was. And then this right here is where tendons lock right in. And anatomically, I have the shots to show that. They lock into two balls right there on both sides. And they run down, and I can show you any other CAT scan, that's too. The Jesse Garant and Associates, they're in Canada and the United States. They did this for me, no charge. They knew how important this was. They did 7 CAT scans, 2D and 3D. Now, this is that same fingertip I just showed you, this one here. All right. There's where the bone is. You can just barely see it. That's the problem with mud fossils, the mud fossils. The other ones are not quite as bad, but when they transition completely into mudstone, you don't get much of a difference. Where you see the differences is where the membranes are. Membranes, a whole different story than the rest of your body. And that's why you see right here, you can just barely see the membranes. The rest is where all the blood flows up through. But once you get into you see nothing. That's deeper in. This is right as it's starting to go in. So, and Jesse Garant and Associates, they're absolutely fabulous. Here's that fingertip from the back. Here's a bone. There's a bone. That right there is one of the tendons that comes up and it locked into the side. You see this? This is where the tendon locks in, and that's the tendon that comes up through here, and it originally was in that side, coming up from here. That's this. And again, you're not going to see that. You have to have this done by somebody fabulously professional like Jesse Garant. This was 10 years ago they did this. They did 7 of them. Now this black indicates to me that's more likely that's the vein side. And that little hole right there is where the vein blood would go back and forth. All right, so there's your tendon, because you have to have those to make your fingers work. This is the bone. You see? And this is the tendon on the other side. And that right there, I believe, was probably where the artery was. And then it broke off. That's why I have this thing on here, you see it? It broke right off of there. Now, I drill into these. I don't just take it off the surface. So the blood was good. The mud fossil, the mud one was not quite as good. The other two were just basically raw red blood. Very simple to get blood out of these things. There's no problem whatsoever. So I've just shown you giants. That hand is 4 feet wide. It's right here. It can be tested. I'm not hiding anything. I got all that stuff. I got knuckles. I got fingers. I got bones. I got eroded in every different condition, all the way down to apical tufts. I'm telling you, it's just amazing. Absolutely incredible what I discovered here right on my own property. I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't go anywhere. Here's the other one I had DNA tested, was this. Now this one leaked blood right out of it, coming out of these holes. The rest converted into silicon. It all depends on the conditions, where it was, how it became entombed, what the condition was before it became entombed, and then after, what soaked into it. Did it stay in a basin where, because that's where I am, in what they call it's a basin. It's just like in a boiling pot. So all of this stuff cooked and laid and cooked and laid and cooked and laid, and eventually all the fluids were out of it, and then they whatever was in that general area did what is called nucleophilic invasion and substitution. So this bone was boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled. All the flesh boiled off. It turned into mud. That's what all the red mudstone is. The just gooey stuff. And the bone remained because it has that fascia that facilitated the fossilization. And then, after all that stuff was boiled out of it, it took on whatever was in the general area. Sometimes it takes on mud like this. Sometimes it takes on something like this. This is a gigantic hair follicle. And it's all look the same color, almost the same chemistry. But again, where you see is where you have membranes. That's a membrane because there's a muscle attached there. And this is the sebaceous gland, that's the hair shaft. So you have to learn to read mud fossils. Now this one here was in a different condition, where there must have been a lot of transition metals right here. And it was deep inside of a lot of flesh. And then for some reason it fractured out. But it has all the details of flesh. Cartilage, muscle fiber. All right, so I think I made my case that these things are real, and this one here is this is all fascia. Well, plural on a lung. It's the coating on a lung that lets it do this and once you get past this, you get into this. You see the little holes there, the alveoli? That's these. I have another one over here somewhere. Hold on. Here's another one here. I mean, I got so much of this stuff, it's ridiculous. This is another one here. This is half and half. You see how this one is completely stripped of the pleura, which is this. This one, every bit of it is still perfectly intact. This one here is a lung, and this part is this. And this part is the pleura has pushed away and stripped away. But it's another lung, and it has that same flap. They all have that that locks it in place so that it doesn't go floating around in your body. And these, in the microscope, you can see they're nothing but these. I don't know if you can see that. But that's what this is. And see how flat it is? That's the key. They all died and they just cooked and cooked and cooked and cooked, and then they took on whatever chemistry was in that area. And all of my stuff did the same thing. It all has a flat spot. This thing here is flat as a pancake. Here it is right here. You see that? That's this side. And there's the other side was laid down flat like this. Now, not only that, the whole body was here. And I know that this was not just disassociated from the body. The body completely disassembled itself. Because right here is where the heart would be. This is a left human lung, DNA tested human, and that curve right there, my friends, is the aortic arch. And the left, your heart sits right under there. Pumps blood into here, puts a little extra oxygen, and then you do what you got to do. This is something that really should not be just totally dismissed out of hand because it is so spectacular. But yes, it is spectacular, and the giants were spectacular, and they were real. And the evidence is not easily dismissed. And there's ones like this around the Earth. That's a giant heart. And that, of course, has a lung with it. They always have hearts and lungs together. And the ones in space, the same thing. I just showed you. Comet 67P. And all the other ones I can account for, too. And this is the one that they went up Bennu and took a sample. That's a heart. To see this, follow this around. A heart surgeon will know that's a heart. All right, that's the valve. This is the same thing. There's another valve here. And this big one is, I believe, the tricuspid. You see, coming around. that big one. Now, they went and hit this, bounced, boom. They went much deeper than they thought, and they came out with a chunk of actual muscle. And you say, oh, come on, Roger. No, yes, they did. And here's what they came back with, if I can find it. Here it is right here. Those are muscle sarcomeres. Now, at the University of Arizona, who has been looking at this stuff for 2 years now and still hasn't been able to understand what they're looking at, this is membranes, the white layers, phospholipids, and this is the red clay with the uracil, all the amino acids, exactly what you would find in the same stuff here on Earth in muscle sarcomeres in a heart, because this is a heart. And I'm going to show you what a heart looks like here on Earth. Remember these sarcomeres, remember the membranes, and here's what a heart looks like. Right here. That's a heart attack victim, it's ripped. But these are the sarcomeres, and these are the layers of phospholipids. They let when you turn this way, it's got to go like that. You see what I'm saying? They have to slide among each other. And it's doing this 24 hours a day. This is just as fluidy as fluid gets. As a matter of fact, it's even shown on this chart about the coefficient of friction. It's the least coefficient of friction of anything on the planet by hundreds and hundreds of times. That's synovial fluids and joints. So I'm not guessing at any of this. And the giants did battle in the heavens. And what they came back with menu, for 2 years this has been sitting around. It's nothing more than sarcomeres and has every bit of the chemistry. And I can't get them to pay any attention to this. Just because it's too spectacular, should we just sit and not look at it and not think about it? See this? These are those valves. These are the ones I just showed you. Also, you got Psyche, which is another gigantic asteroid, comet, whatever you want to call it. And what happens is right there, it breaks off, and you end up down here looking inside the valves. And it breaks off, I discovered, because of iron banding. There's an artery and a vein that runs right around, right against each other. When they're continuing to move and everything's fine. When they stop, they oppose each other and they break open, and that's when you die. They stop and it just pops open. And you get this effect in the heart. You can see it. And that's exactly what you have at Bennu. And when they hit it, they went inside and grabbed the muscle. Now that's Psyche. It's just exactly the same valves. And that is the tendon that holds the muscle into the body. Here's the red, the yellow, and the black. Those are the oxidation levels of blood, because this is a heart. That's a tube. Now, NASA should be able to see that. Who can explain a tube coming out with heart valves, with the same chemistry as a heart has, with the same tendon a heart would have? And look at this separation of colors. That's because one side is the red blood and the other side is the black. You see the black here? This is it's biology, and it's amazing that it's not allowed to be seen. I've been pretty well blocked from showing this stuff, so you're going to have to step up and help me. And this is what they came back with. They spent over $1 billion to do this. And here's the valves right there. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3. And they hit it, and it blew away a whole bunch of stuff, and it went down way deeper than they thought. And they grabbed and popped back off like a bounce. And when they came back with this in a sealed container, and they have all kinds of stuff, and here's what it is the muscle sarcomeres. There's the muscle sarcomeres. And if you look at it down this way, you can see the little rope, because they turn into ropes. But individually, they're these sarcomeres. But there's layers of membrane everywhere. because they all have to slide amongst themselves very fluidly. And that's the membranes. That's just the phospholipids. Very big surprise to them. They couldn't understand, never expected it to be what they found. And I understand that, but that's not real science. Real science is saying, well, let's see what the possibilities are. And I'm showing you things that are not really hard or easily to explain other than the way I explain them. And again, this is the stuff I have on my own property. Well, actually, this is not any longer on my property. It's about 5 feet off. I sold a piece of property, and when I thought this was still on my property, but it's not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I have this in my shop, which is the fingerprints. It's the fingerprints. Remember I talked about grip skin? The thick stuff that's on your fingers and your toes and all that? That's it right there. And these are the sweat pores. Those are fingerprint ridges. You see that? That's the grip skin right there. Keratinized. There's no blood in that. You got to go below. That's why I broke this off. When I first found this, it wasn't broken. I had to break that off around the fingernail. And well, I showed you the hand. And again, this is stuff, it can be retested. I'm not hiding anything. I'm showing you this blood coming out of them. And all of this stuff burning off in space. The astronauts say their suits smell like steak after they do a spacewalk and they come inside. It smells like sirloin. And that's because it's cooking out of some blood vessel somewhere out in space. And God says he loves the smell, aroma of meat cooking. I mean, I believe I heard somebody say that. Now, I also have well, here's this one here. I showed you this, but this has literally raw blood once you get underneath here. Fingers and toes are saturated, literally saturated with blood. You get all the blood you want out of here, tons and tons of blood. And as a matter of fact, you see this little fingertip? Hold on. I got a little fingertip here that turned into olivine and crystals. Very, very cool. Now, that's at the tip of a finger. Now, at every tip of every finger, you got 2 little spots that come out, the artery and the vein. Now, the artery, in this case, is right there. That's red blood. This, let me see, let me come up a little closer. Let me back off here. All right. Coming down in there, you can't see it well at all, but there's the artery and the vein. The artery is on this side. Whoops. Let's do it this way. Here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. You got an artery and a vein. The artery is right there, and it died laying like this. And I can tell that because I can see the line across here that is now right here is blood. It has all those crystals and so forth underneath, and it died like this. And the red blood ran out here. If you look at it in a microscope, it's just red. It's like ruby. And the other side, the black side, it doesn't run out of. But that's a fingertip. That's the fingernail. And that's the blood that came out from the top of the finger, right like that. And I got a ton of fingers and toes. I mean, I got them coming out of my earlobes. And everybody does. And I got new species, feet. That's a foot. That's a foot. That's not a shoe. That is a foot. Hold on. Just like our feet, basically. It had a tibia here. You see that round spot? The tibia goes right there. And it's cradled up in the back. And the fibula sits on the side. Now, between the two of them, you can do all those kind of movements that you have to do to walk. This is nothing more than heavy-duty cowhide, basically. It looks like it to me. And inside of here, there's springs. I have other ones that are eroded, really eroded down to inside, where you can see the springs very easily. Now, this one died, I believe, on its side like this. Remember I said, basically they all died just laying there, and sooner or later they dried out and got transitioned by whatever kind of stuff they were in. So anyway, that's some pretty good evidence to support what I'm saying here. Okay, I suppose I'm going to leave it at that for today, but there is a giant fish here in the desert. This is highlighted so you can see it better, but these are all the scales, and there is Typhon, and it goes all the way across North Africa, and this is the Dra River, which is his throat. And he's all running off the blood, but he's gashed across here, exactly as it says in the ancient text, as he was attacking Ares, who turned himself into a fish, as all the gods turned themselves into animals. It's all written exactly what it is. His red flared eye, all of it, everything is exactly correct. And this is on top of the surface of the earth. I don't know when this happened, but the way they explain it wasn't that long ago. You know, when I say not long ago, I'm talking not millions and millions of years. I really can't say one way or the other, but I can tell you what it is. If you come up here and get yourself looking down at the throat and all the dragon scales and all that stuff, shown it hundreds of times, I have many, many videos about it. All right, that's unhighlighted. There's the fish. And he's being spit at by Typhon, who runs all the way across North Africa. And Typhon, if you look at his head closely, I have one highlighted here somewhere. There's his red flared eye. If you go up and you look, you can see his throat goes all the way down. All that stuff was being spit. He's got beards. He's exactly as advertised by Apollodorus. Now, if you've stayed and watched, I've shown you things that are extremely bizarre. Now, a lot of people say, oh, no, you got to go with the Bible. I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. But what it says, in the beginning, there was chaos. Well, that's pretty much chaos to me. So I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. I'm just saying it's not complete. In the beginning, there was chaos, yes. And then from there, you know, the days of creation, I don't know if they were one day or what did a day represent then. They lived to be 1,000 years old. So, you know, there's a lot to think about, but there's a lot of texts that have been suppressed. And even the Nag Hammadi text just discovered, 1945, I think, and they relate to all of this stuff. The Nag Hammadi text is totally changed, and the same thing with the Dead Sea Scrolls, changes literally everything from the beginning of creation. It was creation. It was not some slime just turned to life. It was creation by gods, not just one, but one started the whole cascade of things. And then there's just every son wants to overthrow his father. That's how it went right down the line. So the fathers, which were the dragon gods, they would eat the babies, just eat them, so that they would be inside of them. They can't kill them. They couldn't kill them because they're gods. So they would eat them and keep them locked in Tartarus. Tartarus apparently is inside of every creature, sounds like to me. Because the big red dragon would show up, and in Revelations 12 already happened. And she was standing on the moon ready to give birth, and they took the baby, who ended up being Zeus, and the red dragon came down. She gave him a rock to eat, wrapped up in swaddling cloth, and the red dragon ate it. And then when Zeus grew up, he took over. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at this stuff as pretty much historical documentation of history. You can take it any way you want, but until we examine it, it's just an empty space. And I've been examining this for a long time. It's like I showed you, I had the DNA test done 10 years ago. So, you know, and all I can say is, I think I've been called on to do this. with everything else that's so bizarre and crazy, I think I have been called on to do this. I had messages that I'm not going to talk about it right now, but this stuff just falls in my face. I can't keep it away from me. And people have just been reporting to me just all the craziest things, but it just all pans out to be true as far as I can determine. So even like Petra's nothing more than muscle and a big artery, and they carved all that stuff out of the blood, which is the artery. I don't show it here, but you can see if you look at Petra, it's made out of blocks of sarcomeres, just like this. If you look at Petra, there's a big round thing where the treasury goes, and then there's all these blocks on the side, and it's inside of arteries. Jesus himself said that the earth is a corpse, and he who discovers the earth discovers a corpse, and he who discovers the earth discovers the body. And now I'm seeing them in space. They had the battles in the space. It was recorded by virtually everybody. Velikovsky did the documentation. It's Worlds in Collision. I wrote a book about him 10 years ago because I was proving what he said, and I met so much resistance, and just arrogant, nasty resistance. So finally, you get a little calloused, maybe a smidge bitter at what we're being fed is just not the truth, and it just doesn't seem to have any effect on anybody. Nobody seems to care, and I mean literally nobody. I have a lot of people that look at this stuff and they say, "Oh wow, look at that," but I don't think they care about being misled. That's not what I'm finding. They're not standing up and saying, "Hey, teacher, tell me what's wrong. Why is Roger wrong?" That's just not happening. Not that I can find. Although I could see a little slow twist there, but that's just not, there's no slowness to this. It's done. 10 years ago it was done. So I'm going to stop for now, I guess. I keep going off the rails at this, but how can you not? If you're looking for truth, and there is nothing but, as far as I'm concerned, once you don't have truth, you are done. Your life is meaningless. Meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. Meaningless. No meaning. Meaning nada. You just accept what you're being told and repeat it. They call it going along to get along. Well, I never did. Ain't about to do it now. All right, I love you all. Take it or leave it.